following year, the second International Conference of Working Women in Copenhagen, women's rights activist Clara Zetkin called for an International Women's Day to give women a greater voice to further the demands for equal rights. It was unanimously achieved by the attendees from 17 countries, including Finland's first 3 women MPs. And International Women's Day, as we now know it, was marked for the first time in March 1911, and the date fixed as the 8th of March for every year in 1913. The United Nations celebrated it for the first time in 1975. So when did International Women's Day begin? Why do we still need it today? Well, it's celebrated as a national holiday by countries across the globe, with women often given flowers and gifts, and there are IWD events in major cities worldwide. But in the centenary in 2011, the sitting president, Barack Obama, called for March to be known as Women's History Month, saying, "History shows that when women and girls have access to opportunity, societies are more just, economies are more likely to prosper, and governments are more likely to serve the needs of all their people." And we remark and note, actually, that Thomas Coram, the founder of Coram, what is today known as Coram and originally the Foundling Hospital, was a great champion, one of the earliest champions of the education of girls and women, saying that he didn't understand why anyone would oppose the education of women and girls when they held in their arms the future of the nation. And what state are we in some 300 years later from Thomas Coram's wishes and the centenary of women's suffrage? Well, the fact is that the COVID-19 pandemic has stalled progress towards achieving gender parity. The World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index benchmarks 156 countries across 4 key dimensions and tracks progress towards closing gender gaps over time. And the global average distance to parity grew in 2021, according to the latest report, and it found it will now take 135.6 years to close the gender gap, compared to 99.5 years in 2020. So that's the context in which we meet, but we are not to be dimmed in our passion and intent. And today we want to celebrate the achievements of inspiring women from refugee and migrant women's journeys to leadership, and nowhere more than in our own Coram Children's Legal Centre. And it's my pleasure now to introduce you to Rosalyn Akar Grams, who joined the Coram Children's Legal Centre as Managing Director of Legal Practice and Children's Rights in 2019. Ros is an experienced solicitor specialising in asylum, immigration and human rights cases. She's an accredited supervisor under the Law Society's Immigration and Asylum Accreditation Scheme. She has acted for clients throughout the asylum process, all the way up to the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court, with significant experience in bringing judicial review. We'll also note that before joining Coram, she was the interim national manager of the Medico-Legal Report Service and the Legal Advice and Welfare Service at Freedom from Torture. And before that, she was shortlisted as Human Rights Lawyer of the Year in the Law Society Excellence Awards of 2017. That is a daunting array of achievements already, and I would like to hand you over to Ros now to chair our Inspiring Women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol, and good afternoon, everyone. And as Carol says, we're really delighted to be welcoming you all here today to celebrate our International Women's Day event. It's my honour to be chairing the event and to introduce 4 inspiring women leaders from our sector. Over the past 20 years as an asylum and immigration lawyer, I've had the privilege of meeting, representing, and increasingly working alongside many inspiring refugee and migrant women. I've observed how challenging some of their journeys have been, and I've been inspired by the determination of the women around me. I would like to think there is increasing recognition of the value and richness that lived experience brings to our work. And yet we continue to be faced with an extremely difficult context, which Carol has touched on. But in addition, we see retrograde measures proposed by the Nationality and Borders Bill that will make it harder for refugees to seek sanctuary in this country, and once here, harder to settle and integrate. 6 months on, we know that there remain hundreds, if not thousands, of Afghan refugees stuck in hotels in limbo, unable to move on and begin to live their lives here. And we've seen a slow response to the refugee situation for refugees fleeing Ukraine. No doubt our speakers will touch on some of the challenges they have faced along the way. But today we also want to focus on the really positive contribution these women have made to celebrate their achievements. The 4 women who will be speaking today are inspirational leaders in the truest sense of the word. They are Gada Al-Naziri, who is the head of policy and public affairs at Hibiscus. Hibiscus is a charity with over 30 years experience working with Black, minoritized and migrant women and families at the intersection of the immigration and criminal justice system. As a trustee at Hibiscus, I've already seen the impact of the work that Gada has done since she started in August of last year, really collaborating and galvanizing the sector on issues these women caught in the 2 legal systems face. Gada is originally from Iraq and came to the UK 12 years ago. After that, we'll be hearing from Nisa Tanin. Nisa is the Immigration and Legal Advice Manager at Coram Children's Legal Centre. She coordinates and oversees all our immigration advice and outreach work, which is a hugely important part of our work reaching children, young people and families, often with no recourse to public funds or those excluded from legal aid provision. Nisa is a skilled immigration solicitor who's developed expertise and delivered training to the sector, including on the EU settlement scheme. Nisa came to the UK from Afghanistan as a child. Following that, we'll be hearing from Tashi Tahir, who is the Parliamentary Officer at We Belong. We Belong is a migrant youth-led organisation at the forefront of campaigning for the rights of young migrants and for changes to the policies that prevent young migrants participating in society. Their impactful campaigns, policy work and interventions have led to changes in government policy, including for student loans and access to higher education, and more recently to the removal of the lengthy and costly 10-year route to settlement for young people who came to the UK as children and are fully integrated. Tashi herself came to the UK from Pakistan at the age of 7 with her mother, and they claimed asylum. Finally, we'll hear from Aayad Lami, who is a solicitor here at Coram Children's Legal Centre, where she leads on our project with the London Borough of Ealing, focused on early identification and resolution of immigration issues for looked after children in their care. Again, this is a core strand of our work at Coram and feeds into our policy and research work. Aayad is originally from Iraq and has a fascinating, diverse and international career, which includes working within the banking sector and leadership roles in the Citizens Advice Bureau. Each of our speakers will be talking for around 5 minutes or so about their journey, and they may touch on the things that have made a difference to them in terms of their career development and their own recommendations to other inspiring leaders. I'm going to try to keep everyone to time. At the end, there will be an opportunity to pose questions to the panel, and we'll do our best to get through them all. Just a reminder that, that all attendees are muted and cameras are switched off. So do please put your questions in the Q&A function as we go along. And as Carol said, a reminder for anyone who's joining late that the event is recorded. So the brief introductions that I have given, of course, do not do justice to the lived experience of the speakers, and therefore it's just so valuable that we're hearing directly from them today. So with that, I will hand over to our first speaker, who is Gada Al-Naziri. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosalyn. I'm very glad to be given this opportunity to be here to discuss the importance of women leaders with lived experience and speak out about the biases and challenges I have overcome in line with this year's International Women's Day theme, Breaking the Bias. I came to the UK from Iraq in 2009 as a refugee. I was refused and disbelieved. This has actually impacted my life, and I have decided to help other women who were caught in the immigration system like me. My lived experience have helped me in my current job. I could easily say when I'm talking to the other women that I work with, I have been in your shoes. I identify with you. I'm sure you identify with me. I can help you to speak out and have a voice. As you all know, recently, the Nationality and Borders Bill has been voted down in the House of Lords. The peers rejected the plan to the bill to criminalize refugees based on the method on arriving to the UK under Clause 11. If the bill was introduced and passed at the time that I came into the UK, then I would have been in prison. That's why I'm here today sharing my experience, as well as working at Hibiscus, campaigning and lobbying the UK government to keep the right and protection of refugees in the bill. I would like to share with you some of the things that actually have made difference to me. When I came here, I actually was supported by refugee women rights organization. I found myself there and I found my voice. I have participated in their campaigns calling to end detention, as well as asking for the right work for the refugees and ending destitutions for women who have executed their right to appeal. As well as one of the things that helped me was I was part of the women network, which refugee women networks, which created some solidarities on the issues that impacted my life as a refugee. I have wanted to support and help, so I provided some training and mentoring to refugee women to support them to become trustees in other organizations. My recommendation to aspiring women leaders like me: every story matters. We need to speak out so that people begin to listen to us. When many of us speak out, the louder our voices are. We deserve to be treated equally and with respect. And I'm a living evidence. If I can do it, you can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gada, and fascinating to hear of your story and your achievements, as well as the biases and challenges you faced along the way. We're now going to turn to our next speaker, and that is Nisa Tanin, who is our Immigration Legal Advice Manager here at Coram Children's Legal Centre.
Thank you, Ros, and thank you for this opportunity to speak on this day. As you mentioned earlier, I came to the UK at the age of 14. I left Afghanistan at the age of 11, and I first we sought refuge with my family in France, and we subsequently then sought refuge in the UK. When I first came to the UK, one of the main challenges that I faced was not knowing the English language, and there wasn't, in the school that I was in, there wasn't really any facilities for English as a foreign language for students. So it was a very long journey for me to teach English to myself, and Now I do actually appreciate the process of that, because I learned quite a lot in the process. I subsequently went on to do a degree in politics and international relations, a master's in strategic studies, and I then converted to law. I initially trained in constitutional tort, which essentially holds the state to account for breaches of its obligations and duties to citizens. And for the past 5 years, I have practiced in immigration and asylum law. I think one thing in my experience that I found very helpful in trying to go through this long educational journey and long work experience has been the support of individuals that I came across throughout my working life and also during my education, who were both men and women, and were very inspiring and recognized perhaps the unique aspects that I could bring to the job working with migrants and other vulnerable groups. And I think that was very helpful, and it allowed me to develop my skills. And the other side of it that has been very helpful is that I think increasingly in the immigration sector, we are now having a recognition that migrant and refugee people and women have something unique to bring. And I think that is a very positive development that needs to be invested in. And I think one of the things that, for example, just today I was attending a training for leadership, managerial responsibilities, and I think having training and resources put in, as well as opportunities, would be very important. One of the sad facts is that migrant and refugee women face a lot of socioeconomic obstacles. They come from homes that they have left, starting everything from scratch. And I think there needs to be a recognition in the sector that it is financially very difficult. It takes a much longer process of time for migrant and refugee women to reach positions of leadership. And that, I think, does need to be incorporated into the structure that we provide to support them. But I do think that there have been a lot of positive developments on that front, and I really hope that that can be further developed and strengthened. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nisa. Thanks for sharing your experience. A reminder just that as we go along, if anyone does have any questions that they want to put in the Q&A, please do, and we'll begin to collect those up. Next, we're going to hear from Tashi Tahir, who is the Parliamentary Officer at We Belong. Thank you, Tashi.
Thanks so much, Rosalyn, and also for inviting me to speak. I guess I thought it might be useful for everyone if I first spoke about my personal migration journey and some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. As Ros mentioned earlier, I came to the UK when I was 7 years old from Pakistan with my mum. We were fleeing persecution for our religion. And like, many families that arrive in the UK, when fleeing danger, there is a sense that you have reached safety and the challenges before you will be minor compared to what you've overcome. And in many cases, we were welcomed. We were sent up to Glasgow in Scotland. And of course, it was a bit of a culture shock when you're used to 40-degree weather and you're sent to one of the coldest places in the UK, where gale force winds, heavy rains, and you experience 4 seasons in one day. So yeah, a bit of a shock. But in many ways, my entire childhood and actually now my adulthood was spent battling with the immigration system. So it was in no way typical. because of my mum's past experience in Pakistan, she suffered quite a lot from a lot of mental health problems. And that meant A, social work was around quite a lot, and B, when she was in and out of hospital so much, I was in and out of foster care. And for these reasons, I really matured quite quickly, because I had to take personal responsibilities of adult things like doing the weekly shopping and cleaning, as well as, you know, being on top of my homework. And really it was in education that I found my solace, because I really believed in that idea that if I got better grades or a good degree, I could pull myself and my mum out of the poverty we were experiencing. We were both in the asylum system for 10 years of my life, so living on £5, I think, around about that, like, for so long. And for that reason, most of my friends were also refugees and migrants, because only they could understand what I was going through. And, you know, and as Nisa mentioned, there was also, I guess, a language barrier as well. Although the way I learned English was not actually by being social and talking to other people. I was a bit of an introvert and a bit of a geek. I mostly watched Disney Channel, and that's why I've got like a slight twinge to my accent, especially when I say certain words. American twinge, like water instead of water. So we were in this immigration process for a really long time. And along the way, there were quite a few setbacks. When I was 10 years old, immigration control came knocking on our door in a dawn raid and detained me and my mum. We were held in Dingle Detention Centre for a month. You know, as a child, there was no difference for me whether it was a detention centre or prison. It felt like a prison. There were bars in the window, and we had limited communication with the outside world. And it was a really harrowing experience that doesn't leave you. We were detained once again when I was 15. Thankfully, that time it was only for a day. Again, my escape was put all in my education, achieved good grades in typical immigrant fashion. And I was on top of my class. I achieved A's and everything. And it came to a point where I had to apply for university. And I received offers from all 5 of my choices. But suddenly, you know, I was stopped at the gates because I was still an asylum seeker. And because of that, I was classified as an international student in all of my UCAS choices. And that meant the prospect of paying tens of thousands of pounds of fees, which I couldn't afford as an asylum seeker. I searched high and low for a way to get through this, and I was really, really fortunate enough to be able to win a scholarship to study maths at St Andrews University. But in my search, I realised that there were many other thousands of young migrants across the UK who were unable to access student finance. And that's how I found We Belong, formerly known as Let Us Learn. And I joined We Belong in 2019 to campaign for the rights of young migrants like myself, so that, you know, young people like myself are not devoid of opportunities simply because of the immigration status they hold. On reflection, there are, I guess, a few things that made a difference to my leadership journey that I just briefly want to touch on. One is recognizing that the things that you have been through, the struggles that you've gone through, don't define you, but they are also a strength. They're a testimony to what you have overcome and the resilience you have inside you. You know, surviving those challenges is an opportunity as well as challenge. And others that that I've talked to on a daily basis, young people, can see the hope through you. You know, whatever you face, you went through it, you were able to survive, and we have to remind ourselves of that, of our own resilience. And then I guess my final thoughts on what others can do to support women from migrant backgrounds is really kind of what we're doing here today, is inviting them to the table. You know, women like us need to know that their ideas and presence adds value and are needed. Sometimes when young women are invited to meetings that We Belong, they sit quietly without contributing. And someone once told me that if you're in the room, it's because you're valued and we want to hear your thoughts. And if they hadn't said that to me, there's so many times that I probably wouldn't have spoken up. So I guess that those would be a couple of my reflections.
Thank you so much, Tashi, and I hope everyone was able to to hear everything, because that was a fascinating story. I heard and I saw a note that there may be some connection problems, so I hope everyone was able to hear Tashi's experience. I'm struck by some of those childhood experiences with foster care and detention centres. We're going to now hear from Aayad, who is a solicitor here at Coram Children's Legal Centre. Aayad, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me today, and thank you so much. It is my pleasure and my honor to hear these amazing stories and to share my experience with everybody in this sector. I have different journeys and different chapters in my legal life, but it is started at a very young age. I came from a family who are like having solicitors and judges. And I spent my childhood with my father and his law firm, and I always was fascinating to see the power of law and how can you use it. And that gave me the power, because I thought knowledge is the power and education is the power. So I started to study very hard and from very early age. I graduated from University of Baghdad at the age of 17 because I was taking every 2 years in 1 year, and I was awarded the youngest solicitor at that time. I had a passion to fight for injustice and unfairness in the world, and therefore I started to chose a sector which was really male dominant sector in Iraq at that time, which is the human rights. And I found it really difficult and challenges, although I came from like a family have low background, but also the challenges I faced through my family to stop working in this sector and is this male dominated human rights thing, especially at that time when there was no freedom of speech and a young woman to defend political prisoners. It was a big issue. But this chapter was really the ground that I established my life in it. With that, my dad is an international lawyer, so I had the advantage of studying in both countries, the UK and in Iraq. And I was the head of the International Bar Association for junior lawyers at that time. And I managed to do conferences in Tunisia and Berlin and Paris. And I was the head of supporting women and children. I was against domestic violence and any violence for any gender. Then this chapter, unfortunately, did not continue because of my passion to the human rights issues. I was forced to leave because I was like either not to speak or to leave the country. And then I left the country. So this was the base of my chapter and my legal experience. When I came to the UK, I started to study again, and I had another law degree, and I started from scratch again, and then start to work in different types and in different offices, and then gain more knowledge. Then I got married, I went to Germany, and I studied law again. So this is the third degree I had, and I was able to work in a Deutsche Bank as a relationship manager for private banking. The knowledge I had and the languages helped me a lot to establish the work. But unfortunately, it's not actually, fortunately, I had children, which is an amazing thing, but unfortunately, I had to stop because I am a mom and I am a mother and I am a woman. So I have to stop my career totally to raise up my children. And I reached one stage in my life that I have to choose either between work or family, which I chose my family. But at the same time, I continue to study and learn a lot. And then I was helping lots of charity sectors, and especially for migrant women to help them to raise their voice and speak up and human rights issues. After 13 years in this chapter, I had to come back to UK for personal reasons. And then I found out that my law degree in the UK has collapsed. So therefore I have to study again. So that will be the fourth time I studied law, studied again. But this time it was really challenging because I was a mother for two, single mom, no support, nobody helping me. My study day start at 11 in the evening when everybody start to sleep, sleep 1 hour a day, and then finished my degrees. Took a while, it's part-time because I have to do it again because I am mom and I was working. And then another chapter started when I started to volunteer with the Citizen Advice. With the Citizen Advice, I really found my passion to help people from disadvantage, from different background, from different sectors. And I was fighting for justice. And I was like really campaigning with every aspect with the Citizen Advice. When I started, it started from the bottom line. Actually, challenges facing me as a woman, single mom with children, needed like specific time to do drop off and collector from school. So therefore I started as a receptionist. And then as a receptionist, then after 2-3 months, I did a training to be a legal advisor, which I managed to finish in a quickly time. And then I found the opportunity and I worked with the Citizen Advice with different offices. So I started with Camden, and then I worked in Watford, and recently I was at Kensington and Chelsea. In Kensington and Chelsea, I was in the senior management team and helping and lead for different projects, including the EU settlement scheme and the Windrush compensation scheme, help to claim universal credit, housing management, and also the scam awareness. I joined Coram to do this amazing project to help children and children in need, and started this project in September. However, in these chapters and these journeys, there are always challenges. There was like sometimes facing debts, visa things, immigration issues, facing the communities, facing traditions, facing parents and friends and challenges. But my advice to young generations, to young women that's listening to me, it is no matter how many you fall, no matter the battles that you face, it is the matter that how many times you stood up and you make your voice heard. During this journey, I had lots of people. When I tried to climb the ladder, people tried to push me down, or people tried to kick me, people tried to shake the ladder, people tried to do all sorts of things. But for myself, I give a promise to do to my daughter and to every young woman that I will hold the ladder for you. And if you want to climb, I will push the people away that they will try to pull you down. And then I will help you to start this journey. The only thing that I would say to everybody, keep resilience, determination is important. And every challenge, you will look at it later and you will say, this is my history and I did that. The challenges are really make us who we are. And I am very, very grateful to who I am. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Aayad. You know, a remarkable story, as the stories of all the women that we've heard from. Really struck by you know, how you've adapted to different situations and continually learning and growing. And one of the comments in the chat from our colleagues in Coram Life Education was about being struck by this theme of resilience, which I think has run through all of the stories that we've heard. I might invite all of our speakers, to come on camera. We're going to go into a Q&A now. If we've got a couple of questions, but please do keep the questions coming. And if anyone has any further questions, to put them into the Q&A function or in the chat if that's easier for people. you know, one of the things that I've sort of heard from all of you is about your kind of determination, and the, you know, the powerful words that Aayad finished with about kind of continuing to use your voice, and to you know, to that kind of determination. One of the questions that we've had from Eleanor in the Q&A is around what organisations and the sector needs to do, which I think some of you have touched on in your in what you've said, but if you want to elaborate on that, because it can't just be down to the migrant and the migrant women to do it themselves. So what should the sector and organisations be doing to ensure that women from refugee and migrant backgrounds can lead? Who would like to come in on that?
I can quickly
Tashi.
just have a little, I guess, a little short point. I guess from my experience at We Belong, I'm constantly inspired and supported by the people I work with. There are some really wonderful, really powerful women, and I really feed off that energy. But what we do, and I think we do this really well, is we really carve a space for issues to be raised in a non-judgmental way. And we talk, we still talk about the challenges that we face, and how we can overcome them together, ensuring, you know, our voices are heard and given equal weight. And it's really important that these women are given a support network so that we lift each other up. And having this network of female role models, I think, is a great way to share the advice and those experiences. So I think that would be my answer, something that was really useful for me.
Thank you. And Gada, I know that Hibiscus does a lot of work with the women who use the service to involve them in your, you know, in the work and in the policy calls. Can you tell us some more about that work?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, as I said, like probably because I've been supported by a similar organization throughout my journey, and this is when I found myself and kind of more of use my voice to support other like campaigns or issues that it has affected me during my kind of immigration journey. This is what I kind of, when I was given the opportunity to leading the work of such an organization similar to the one that supported me, I really wanted to recenter the voices of the women and kind of more of involve them into this like kind of work that the organization do, which is the direction of like what policies that are going to be affecting them. So part of this work, we do have a kind of a women's group that women will come and we talk about their struggles and challenges. And then we kind of find ways on how we take their stories and their kind of more of life experiences into and data, and kind of more of putting in a piece of work that could support a policy change, and then involve them from the beginning of the work into when there is opportunity to go to Parliament, for them to go and kind of more of give a life kind of testimony as well as evidence, as well as celebrate with them when there is a kind of a small change of, as I said, as for the Nationality and Borders Bill, when it's not being passed yet. So there is some kind of a small celebration. It's still not you know, a big, but it's like it's a very kind of continuous work that we do. So yeah, so this is kind of the work, is more of how to involve them and how to work with people with lived experience. It's quite important. And part of my work is actually with Hibiscus is to develop guidelines on how to work with people with lived experience, because it's not easy. It can't be re-traumatize them, or can kind of actually harm them in a way. So you really need for organizations that work with the sector that is supposed to be supporting migrants and refugees. They need to know how to work with them and how to involve them into co-production and the work they do.
Thank you. A sort of related question from Marianne in the Q&A. She said she liked what Nisa said about resources needing to be put in to support migrant women in positions of responsibility, not just opportunities. This feels like fairness. How do we frame calls for resources in an empowering way? Who would like to come in on that? Nisa, did you have any further thoughts?
Just kind of following on a little bit from what I was trying to get at is that I mean, the reality is that migrant and refugee women come and start a whole life from scratch. They've lost everything, and the socioeconomic element of that is really big. So there are language challenges, first of all, and learning about a new society, how everything operates. Having, you know, like Aayad was explaining so starkly, having responsibilities as a mother, you know, within a family, trying to juggle all of these things and trying, you know, many of the degrees in other countries are not accepted here. So having to start from scratch. And I think one of the things, you know, we all know, for example, in the legal sector, how much it costs to actually do a law conversion and then do the LPC or the bar exam. We are talking about thousands of pounds. And I think one of the ways that women could be empowered is if there are structures in place or financial assistance, essentially, to help them study, flexible working conditions, I think, but also very specific support that takes into account that they are coming from traumatized backgrounds. We obviously have something very unique to give to other refugee and migrant groups, but that does come with an added element that it can be re-traumatizing and it can be very difficult. So I think in terms of structures, we do need to think a little bit maybe widely in terms of the financial support that can be given, but also I think in terms of practical support that can be given, that rather than just having opportunities to work in the sector, we have more of a system in place or a process in place in which women are actually empowered and their skills are developed, but whilst at the same time recognizing that in fact, you know, they have very unique skills that come from another place, which can also be an added resource. So not just a question, I think, of integration, but it's just a question of trying to use, you know, a range of experiences. So I hope that answers to an extent Marianne's question, but those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you. And we've had a question in the chat which Aayad has started to answer, but I might just read that out and see if there's any other reflections. So these are sort of questions, again, I think coming from sort of education point of view and thinking about the younger, the next sort of generation. You know, and the question sort of notes that they're struck by what Aayad said about I will hold the ladder up for you. The question is about how we as organisations working with young people in schools, I think this comes from our colleagues in Coram's education division. You know, how can organisations hold up that ladder, and what, you know, what steps can we take in terms of, you know, the younger generation coming through? Aayad, I think you started to answer that question, but maybe you could elaborate on your thoughts.
Yeah, I believe if we find equal opportunities and give the opportunities to young people to have education, the education will give them the power to fight for any injustice. It's not only women, any gender. So then they finding these opportunities, find the issues, find what's the problem, have a clear plan, and then that will support them in their future. And we need to remember that even if we do small acts, if we multiply it by millions of people, it will have lots of impacts on different people. So that's what we can do.
Thank you.
I just wonder if I may just add to that. When I came to the UK, I was 14 years old, and I think in terms of supporting, time has obviously quite a bit of time has elapsed since then, and things might be slightly different. But I think language is the most obvious thing, but I think it's the way in which the language support is provided. If you're taking, there has to be an intensity to it to try to kind of get people to get to a stage within a certain time frame, because there is, I think, a problem in kind of lagging, where it takes longer, and it just really depends what age you've come here. If you've come at the age of 15, time is very short by the time that you set your GCSEs and your A levels, and that can really hinder the opportunities you've got. I remember when I came here and there was no language support, I would sit in a class with a dictionary, and I would copy what was written on the board without understanding a single word, but literally just drawing it. So then going home and trying to find those words in a dictionary in order to then figure out what the teacher had taught. So it's like a double task, and it takes, it takes determination, but it really depends what your own circumstances are, whether you have the opportunity to do that. So I think language is really the key to trying to support young people. And there are things in place, but I don't think they're perfect, and those gaps do need to be filled.
Thank you. We've got a couple more questions in the Q&A. This one's from Nanette, who says, "Thank you for your amazing and inspiring testimonies. What role do you envisage for the diaspora, i.e. if specific nationalities are represented available, and the best practices to facilitate women's transition from their homeland to the UK, and to mitigate the cultural shock and help open up opportunities for women and girls?" So it's some of the things that we've touched on, but I don't know if anyone wants to say anything further about that. I think it's about the role that the wider diaspora can also play in that transition to the UK. And Tashi or Gada, do you have any thoughts on that? Did you experience kind of support from kind of wider networks when you first arrived?
I mean, I would have to say, like, there is this, first of all, there is this stigma about refugees and asylum seekers, even from your own community. Yeah, so you are really facing a lot of barriers and challenges. So from my side, I actually got more support and solidarity from other women that went through the same journeys, but it's not from the same kind of more of my background and my language or my kind of like ethnicity. It's more of because we've been on through this journey and we've had to leave home because of war and conflict, and because of kind of, you've been persecuted because you're a woman and you had to leave. And I think that's kind of the solidarity I think I've had. And this is when you create this kind of more support network, and you support each other and help and kind of find ways of like overcome, the difficulties. But then that will like, I would have probably loved to have more of wider network that will help my English to be improved, or have a befriending group that will come and show me around London and show me around UK and tell me what I supposed to be expected. I didn't have any of that, and I don't know. I mean, I think now there are many projects and many organizations working with that. Like as simple as, I don't know, there is this bike project that they provide bikes to women or to all refugees, and they take them around and show them how to bike, because in my culture, women are not allowed to bike. And so it's as simple as that. And I think if we start thinking about these kind of initiatives of projects that is supporting and helping refugees to overcome and not feeling isolated and feeling that them and there are others, they are not belong, then I think we have a chance to be together and just like overcome all our biases.
Thank you.
If
I didn't know, Tashi, if you wanted to add
a couple of things. I have probably such a similar experience to Gada. When I was growing up and stuff, I just gravitated towards young women from an immigrant background, because again, there was that the education, not being able to speak the language and going through the same experiences. They were the ones that were able to relate. And while this was really useful as a child growing up, I found that it kind of inhibited me later a little bit in my career, in the way that my network was kind of really small. So I think maybe more does need to be done about that. One of the things that I had a really good degree, I had good grades, but one of the things that really did keep inhibiting me was the lack of, the barrier was having access to a network. And we need to find a way for network to be accessible and meaningful in a way that's not too difficult. You really do have to put yourself out there, and sometimes that's difficult for young women of migrant communities, whether that's a cultural thing or most likely a language barrier thing. And maybe a little bit more what can be done is to find mentors that are willing to support you within organizations. And they can, challenge you and come out and bat for you. And as we progress as women leaders, we should be able to be those mentors for others as well. So I think that was just something.
Thank you. I did say a couple more questions, but we've got such interesting questions in the Q&A. I'm going to try and get through a couple more. One is from Anita, who asks, is there one place or one issue where you feel refugee and migrant women voices are especially not being heard? And perhaps just have one person to respond on that one, if anyone has any thoughts that stand out. I could also, I'll read the next question as well, because I really would like to get through a couple more. The other one is from Sabir from the Scottish Refugee Council. What's your message to the Home Secretary, who is ploughing on with the anti-refugee bill that will criminalise women fleeing invasion in Ukraine, the Taliban in Afghanistan, and many other conditions around the world? This is from Sabir, the CEO of the Scottish Refugee Council. Who would like to come in on either of those questions? Quite different questions.
A couple the comments, I guess, on where do I think that young women and migrants, I think maybe just starting off with I guess some of the campaigns and stuff that we were doing, or even in the policy issues. I think there's still more work that can be done in the sector of giving young women the voice to be able to shape those campaigns and what we advocate for. And then also giving them a seat at the table. So when we are having those discussions with policymakers, they're able to tell their lived experience. I think that's something that we could possibly do some more work on. And then I guess maybe a final point, what to say to Home Secretary. I think maybe in many ways, I think she's really going to get a huge amount of backlash and public backlash for what she's doing right now. We can see the amount of sympathy and outpouring from the public for the Ukrainian crisis. And it just doesn't seem like the way that she's going is really feasible at all right now. You know, the stories that we've heard today of the leadership journeys and how much like even this small group of women has contributed already in the short time in the UK is just so powerful. And I really wish she could be in the room to hear about these experiences.
Thank you. I think that's probably, there are some other questions, but I think we're going to run out of time. I think that's a positive and powerful note on which to conclude. So Carol is going to make some final comments, but thank you so much everybody for participating and for your thoughts and your very kind of inspirational words today.
Thank you very much, Ros, and it does fall to me to draw our discussion to a close. I want to thank you all for sharing your stories, because one of the things that you have said is that we together must make sure that that is done, that the stories of women who are contributing so amazingly well to our society and have managed to develop themselves, their families, and these pathways must give encouragement to those that follow. But also how much more needs to be done to ensure that the ladder is not kicked away. It was shaky to start with. It is easy for it to be kicked away, and that's a fight that we must fight. I also reflect that there's an interesting range of comments and questions coming forwards that also relate to that importance of education, that education and being able to access it, being able to make your way in the world is a critical ingredient. And I also just reflect on the importance of how we together empower our children to play their part in supporting these inspiring journeys. Coram Life Education developed the Belonging Toolkit in conjunction with our Young Citizens Group, just to try and demonstrate that all communities can welcome the new, they can welcome diversity, they can all take small steps, as was said earlier, to ensure that the world is a better place. I remember my own son acting as a language buddy to his friend Lum, who had joined his school from Albania, and how enormously enriched his life and our family was by that experience. Could we make that standard? Could we do even more to break down the language barrier and build more networks? Yes, we can, and together we must. But it is only made possible by your courage and your inspiration to us today on International Women's Day. So our love and thanks to you all. And we're now going to close with a video produced by the IWD team around this year's theme, which is Break the Bias. And the campaigners are urging us all to call out gender stereotyping and discrimination whenever they see it. And they also say, let's celebrate the inspiring women. Thank you.
A world free of bias means that we can reach the higher levels of a diverse, equal world by connecting all those wires. Wires that have an electric current running through them allows us to be those positively charged particles. And we, together, are going to break the bias so that we forever will no longer fear fighting for better. There is a bias to be broken. My dream of an equal world is what I have awoken from, and I know that it's something that can become true. As the world is a living photograph, saturated with diversity and hues. I march and I strive, with my head held high, as a woman, and us women will not be pinned down nor weighed down by anything, no matter how hard that anything tries. We all have different stories. We take each day as it comes, by painting the picture, by writing the literature, to be shared with the world. We will choose to challenge, and we will break the bias, and find strength and pump our tires and drive down the open road by taking the steering wheel. We'll rise up from our heels until it is love, confidence, and everything positive that we feel, and until our stories are revealed to the world. Because this is us. We're born to be leaders and born to be great. So let's continue to create our stories in a world where we no longer fear fighting for better.